Assalamu alaikum. So let's take a look at some examples of how Muslims try to combat Islamophobia, or try to reduce it. Um, One is just to do nothing. That's some options that Muslims pursue. A lot of them don't feel comfortable or feel very reluctant giving dawah, especially giving dawah to white people. They may feel that they don't have enough information or aren't able to answer the tough questions, or they may be kind of just reluctant to engage in conversation in the first place, which is what a lot of non-Muslims do as well, especially in public spaces where it might actually be dangerous to do so. I mean, that's in fact why even I don't bring up Islam in public when I see a Muslim, not because I don't like talking about it, just because you could have someone who really doesn't like Islam or Muslims, and then an altercation ensues. So that's one reason. Another reason is sort of cultural language barriers, and a lot of Muslims are reluctant to talk to non-Muslims because they might not give the best response in terms of the nuance of the language. There's also safety issues as well. I mean, some masjids, like for the one example of the Darul Uloom in Chatham, they're a boarding school. So even to bring in non-Muslims, you have these kids that are basically doing a Hifz course and they're sleeping over there and they're staying there. So bringing in people who might be drug addicts or alcoholics, or people who don't like Muslims, or even inviting them to the mosque might have safety implications legally. Dress issues as well. A lot of Muslims dress differently, and that just creates like an intentional barrier right there. And a lot of Muslims don't want to do anything sometimes just because it seems hopeless, and a lot of times they think, well, what can we really offer them if they convert? Which is a fairly it's an important question. With the Darul, what would you have to provide if 100 people converted to Islam? You have to provide them housing and clothing and job opportunities, and a lot of most mosques don't really have the resources for that. So so that's one way, I guess, to give dawah. Second is the dawah booth. Now you see these on universities, you see these on the street, in large cities like Toronto, and there's effectiveness to this. You can help those who are interested in Islam. You can answer their questions. Some people take home the pamphlets and they read it and they may get interested that way. So there's a lot of positives in the dawah booth. But again, most people are afraid to open up conversation in public about just religion in general, let alone Islam. So the people who don't really like Islam and Muslims, which is the main group that converts are interested in at least ameliorating the problem, often do not want to in open talk about Islam. Okay. And again, there's no real set up plan for converts. Like if 100 people take their shahada at a dawah booth, I don't think they have the monetary resources to deal with that level and amount of converts. Okay. And really, when it comes to dawah booths, only the really anti-Islam people who are very vocal will be brave enough to engage in debate with these people. These people who've been trained in these anti-Islamic rhetoric and things like that. Not your run-of-the-mill racist uncle who just just basically doesn't like Muslims because they look different, or because of terrorist attacks they've seen on TV. So again, there's a lot of good in the dawah booth. I'm not discrediting their work at all. Going off on that, there's also the open house, the mosque open house, where they open their doors to non-Muslims, and these are very well intentioned, right? But one of the barriers is, and has nothing to do with how effective they are in trying to get people to the mosque, is that very few non-Muslims will be brave enough to enter a mosque, even if they have a positive impression of Islam. A lot of the times they have to sweep the uncles and aunties who are more conservative under the rug and tell them not to come, or to be on their best behavior. They might start saying something like, why aren't they dressed appropriately, and things like that. And again, even though the open houses are well intentioned, they don't really solve our real problems, in that the people who have the biggest qualms about Islam are just not going to go to a mosque. Even, they're not going to go to a dawah booth, they're not going to approach a Muslim on the street, and they're sure as heck not going to go to a mosque where they're going to be completely outnumbered. Another ways that Muslims have tried to combat Islamophobia is alliance with left-wing groups. So, this officially ties in religion with race, because they'll often use race and religion interchangeably, and they'll say that, when they say an Islamophobic event happens, they'll just basically say it's racism, implying that, Islam is a race. these left-wing groups will try to push the idea of making laws against Islamophobia, which doesn't work. I mean, it just makes people more and more angry against Islam. I mean, drugs are illegal. People still consume drugs in great amounts. In fact, it increased the price of drugs. Like people are going to think, oh, why are you going to tell me what to think? And they're just, if you have Islamophobia laws, they're going to ask their questions. They're going to bring up their issues about Islam in non-public spaces, and then it's just going to become even more toxic, and it's going to turn into an echo chamber. Another negative effect that these Muslim alliances with left-wing groups causes is that it turns Islam from an actual religion that you have to practice, praying 5 times a day, fasting during Ramadan, where you have actual religious rites you have to perform. It turns it from a religious identity into a racial identity. So if Muslims start to think that, I'm not Muslim because I pray 5 times a day, I'm Muslim because my name is Muhammad and my parents were Somali or Arab or Pakistani, there's really no need to practice your religion anymore. And that's really dangerous thinking. And we can see that with a lot of these liberal Muslims that have formed alliances with groups. And another problem with these alliances with left-wing groups is that they kind of engage in what's called whataboutery. These left-wing Muslims actually are given the platform to talk about Islam within liberal media spaces. But whenever a terrorist attack or something bad happens in the name of Islam, instead of explaining why this isn't allowed in our religion, they'll go on the attack and say, well, why should we have to, quote unquote, condemn, these terrorist attacks when they've been terrorizing our nations? This is very kind of whataboutery. And it's understandable why they would think that way, because, they have a lot of understandable resentment, towards these Islamophobic groups and, political groups. But at the main thing is for us is that this may be the only time that our non-Muslim family might actually hear a Muslim on the media. And instead of condemning, they just have to keep on with the same misconceptions about Islam. So I already talked about the public sphere. So I'll go into the different situation that converts, especially white converts, are in different situation as opposed to born Muslims. Now, I'm not saying that one situation is worse or better, but really, born Muslims on the whole, I would say, are interacting less with non-Muslims than we are. Basically, our whole family is not Muslim. So every negative impact or every negative opinion they have about Islam or about us converting to Islam is going to have a direct or indirect impact on our lives. So, they might kick us out of the house, they might cut us out of the will, they might stop talking to us, or just be kind of estranged from us, right? Whereas for us, we're not visibly Muslim, so we don't really have an issue with, non-Muslims walking down the street or on the bus. Whereas for born Muslims, it's completely inverted. So the Islamophobe for them is the rando that yells at them on the street or tries to rip off their hijab or sprays graffiti on the parking lot. They don't have to put up with this person when they go home at the end of the day. So they really have little to no vested interest in trying to reason with a lot of these Islamophobic people. And that's kind of why they tend to avoid getting into discussions about Islam. Also, to that effect, there's little to no consequence to, kind of spout this kind of anti-white talking points in the social media spaces. They kind of see white Muslims as the exception to this rule. But like I said, for European descendant converts, our entire family is not Muslim. So we have no choice but to engage with these people because, we can't, at the end of the day, have Islamophobia laws against them because, what's it going to matter to them? I mean, they're still our flesh and blood, right? And keeping ties with them is a religious obligation. We can't even say oof to our parents, right? We can't cut off blood ties. Whereas, for born Muslims, a lot of their family, even if they're not practicing, are Muslim by name. It's not to say that some of them don't have negative attitudes towards Islam in general. I know a lot of born Muslims who do have Islamophobic family members, and I'm not discrediting the struggle that they're going through. I'm just pointing this out just because the experience we have with Islamophobia as converts, especially white converts, is qualitatively different than born Muslims. So I hope no one gets offended with that explanation, but I'll get onto why our situation might be better if we use our example.